Iran, the #1 global sponsor of terror, has exposed its true face as the destabilizer of the region and the world.
For over 6 months now, these countries, especially the United States, have shielded Israel from any responsibility for the Gaza massacre.
The snooze button is no longer an option. The only option is to condemn Iran and utilize every means necessary to make them pay a heavy price for their horrible crimes.
While they have denied Iran's inherent right to self-defense against the Israeli armed attack on our diplomatic premises, at the same time they shamefully justified the Israeli massacre and genocide against the defenseless Palestinian people under the pretext of self-defense.
Iran and its axis of supporters must be shown that the civilized world will no longer stand idle.
They made cynical attempt to justify and cover up the atrocities of the Israeli regime against the people of Palestine by arbitrary and misleading interpretation of self-defense.
To Iran, Israel's annihilation and igniting the region is more important than Islamic holy sites. The Ayatollah regime, in its plot to impose a global Shiite hegemony through its proxies, has even attacked Saudi Arabia, as we all remember, Aramco oil field, the United Arab Emirates, and anyone else they view as an obstacle. I asked the Algerian representative here, how does this make you feel? Is this a price you support? Attempting to blow up mosques and murdering Muslims? Yet, while this direct Iranian attack on Israel was the first of its kind, it is just the most recent chapter in a blood-soaked saga that started from the moment the Islamic Revolution reared its head. The Ayatollah regime has a clear plan. Its goal has been and continues to be world domination by exporting its radical Shiite revolution across the globe. I assume you all know it. The Islamic regime of today is no different than the Third Reich, and Ayatollah Khamenei is no different than Adolf Hitler. Hitler's Third Reich was envisioned to be a 1,000-year empire stretching across continents, just as Khamenei envisions his radical Shiite hegemony to stretch across the region and beyond. This is why Iran arms themselves with intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. Iran and Israel are on the same continent. You are next. The Ayatollah regimes acts like the Nazi regime, and their army includes Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Revolutionary Guard, and other savage jihadists. Instead of shouting, Sieg Heil, these radical Nazi Islamists scream death to Israel, death to America, death to England. Just like the Nazi regime, the Ayatollah regime sows death and destruction everywhere it touches. For the past years, Ukrainian civilians have been killed from the skies with Iranian weaponry. President Zelensky, in condemnation of Iran's attack last night, said, and I quote, "The sound of Iranian Shahed drones, a tool of terror, is the same in the skies over the Middle East and Europe. This sound must serve as a wake-up call to the free world. Listen to President Zelensky and wake up." Just like the ever-reaching hand of the Wehrmacht, Iran struck Albania with cyber attacks and launches strikes against Kurds in Iraq. We all remember the 2021 attack on the oil tanker Mercer Street, in which British and Romanian crew members were killed. And just yesterday, Iran seized a Portuguese cargo ship. The crew being held right now by Iran includes Indian, Filipino, Pakistani, and Russian nationals. Iran threatens global maritime trade. Iran is not only a terror state, Iran is a pirate state. Colleagues, just this week, the court in Argentina held Iran directly responsible for the 1994 terror attack in Buenos Aires on the Jewish Community Center, which killed 85 people and wounded 300. And just like the Third Reich and their brutal SS officers, the Iranian regime not only spreads evil abroad, but also torments and murders their own citizens. In 2023 alone, the Ayatollah regime executed 834 Iranians. The regime oppresses women while murdering them for not wearing their hijab properly. When the Iranian people peacefully protest this brutality, they are suppressed by live ammunition. Hundreds of protesters were killed and thousands have been arrested. This is a regime that allows its own people to die of thirst in Isfahan, while it funds terror around the world with billions of dollars. What have you done to defend the world from Iran? Seriously, the entire globe is suffering from Iran, including the Iranian people. Please defend them. For years, the world has watched the rise of a Shiite Islamist Reich. Yet, just like during the rise of Nazism, the world has been silent, deafeningly silent. Mr. Secretary General, Iran has been violating Security Council resolutions and the UN Charter for years. They supply Hezbollah with weapons in violation of resolutions 1559 and 1701. They advance weapons proliferation in violation of resolution 2231. They violate resolutions 1540 and 2216. Why have you not used all possible means to condemn Iran and demand compliance? Why have you instead rolled out the red carpet for these genocidal jihadists? Why do you treat them as if they are interested in de-escalation when you know that the opposite is true?
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, Madam President, as we informed in our letter last night in response to the Israeli regime's recurring military aggression, particularly its armed attack on 1st April 2024 against Iranian diplomatic premises, a defiance of Article 2 of the Charter of the United Nations, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran carried out a series of military strikes on Israeli military objectives with dozens of missiles and drones. Iran's operation was entirely in the exercise of Iran's inherent right to self-defense as outlined in Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations and recognized by international law. This concluded action was necessary and proportionate. It was precise and only targeted military objectives and carried out carefully to minimize the potential for escalation and prevent civilian harm. Madam President, we thank those members of the Council who condemned the Israeli armed attack against our diplomatic premises in Syria. Regrettably, in this chamber, certain members of the Council, including the U.S., U.K., and France, has chosen once again to turn a blind eye to reality and overlook the root causes contributing to the current situation. In hypocritical behavior, these three countries falsely blamed and accused Iran without considering their own failures to uphold their international commitment to peace and security in the region. They made unsuccessful attempts to use lies, manipulate the narrative, spread disinformation, and engage in a destructive blame game. All the while, they deliberately disregarded Iran's inherent right to respond to the violation of a fundamental principle of international law, the inviolability of diplomatic representative and premises. Moreover, they ignored the underlying root causes of the current situation in the region. For over 6 months now, these countries, especially the United States, have shielded Israel from any responsibility for the Gaza massacre, while they have denied Iran's inherent right to self-defense against the Israeli armed attack on our diplomatic premises At the same time, they shamefully justified the Israeli massacre and genocide against the defenseless Palestinian people under the pretext of self-defense. They made cynical attempt to justify and cover up the atrocities of the Israeli regime against the people of Palestine by arbitrary and misleading interpretation of self-defense. Madam President, following the Israeli regime cowardly terrorist and armed attack against our diplomatic premises in Damascus, the Syrian Arab Republic, on the 1st of April, we notified the UN Security Council and Secretary General of such international wrongful act, as well as of Iran's inherent right under international law to respond to such terrorist armed attack. Also, in a phone conversation with the UN Secretary General on 2nd April, Iran Foreign Minister discussed the situation and called for taking appropriate action and a strong condemnation from the international community for this horrific crime. We called upon the Security Council to strongly denounce this unjustified criminal and terrorist act, taking decisive and appropriate measure to bring the perpetrators to justice swiftly and prevent the requirements of such horrible crime against the diplomatic premises of any member state. Regrettably, the Security Council has failed in its duty to maintain international peace and security. Russia proposed a press statement to denounce this atrocious act, which was backed by China, Algeria, and many members, but was blocked by the U.S., U.K., and France. Faced with such circumstances, the Islamic Republic of Iran had no choice but to exercise its inherent right to self-defense under international law. Iran has exercised maximum restraint. Now it is time for the occupying regime to bear full responsibility for its consequences. This regime cannot avoid accountability. Madam President, Israel's ongoing destabilized and irresponsible action and atrocities against the nation in the region are a real threat to regional and international peace and security. The Israeli Prime Minister's policy seeks to expand and escalate the conflict in the region to stay in power. The member of the Security Council must not allow such an august body, the Security Council, to be held hostage to the ambitions of such a belligerent regime. It is time for the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility and address the real threat to international peace and security. The Security Council must promptly fulfill its duty under Chapter 7 of the Charter in response to Israeli reckless defiance. It must take urgent and punitive measures to compel this regime to stop its genocide and massacre against the people of Gaza and uphold its obligation, especially fully implement the UN Security Council resolution and legally binding orders of the International Court of Justice. The main and long-standing threat to the peace and security of our region is well known to all, and the attempts to conceal it through disinformation, a smear campaign, or baseless accusation against others are pointless and unfounded. Iran is never seeking to contribute to the spillover of the conflict in the region, nor does it to escalate or spread the tension to the entire region. Contrary to unfounded claims, Iran has no proxy in the region. No individual, group, or country act at the Iran behest. The U.S. and Israeli regime attempt to label the resistance group in the region as the proxies or terrorists. Their sinister aim is only to justify and legalize their malicious and destabilize activities in the region. The resistance group are not proxies or terrorists. They are legitimate and are only fighting against the occupation and aggression of Israel in Gaza and occupied Palestine territories and of the U.S. in the region. International law recognized such legitimate rights against any occupation and aggression. Instead, The US and the UK are fully responsible for all its decades-long aggressions and other crimes and unlawful measures in our region. Furthermore, they are responsible for all crimes of the Israeli regime, as it cannot commit any of such savage crimes in Gaza without the consent, order, and all-out political, financial, and military support of and a collaboration with the United States and the UK. We reject the allegation made by the Israeli regime at this meeting. Such false and unfounded claims don't merit to response. Madam President, as a responsible member of the United Nations, the Islamic Republic of Iran is committed to the purpose and principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, reaffirms once more its commitment to the maintenance of international peace and security. The Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates its consistent position that it does not seek escalation or war in the region, while warning about any further military provocation by the Israeli regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran reaffirms its unwavering determination to defend its people, national security and interest, sovereignty and territorial integrity against any threat or act of aggression, and to respond to any such threat or aggression vigorously and in accordance with international law. The Islamic Republic of Iran will not hesitate to exercise this right when required. Madam President, Excellencies, Iran has no intention of engaging in conflict with the US in the region. We demonstrated our commitment to peace by exercising our restraint about involving the US Army in intercepting Iranian drones and missiles bound for military targets in the occupied Palestinian territories. This underscores our dedication to de-escalating tension and avoiding the expansion of conflict. However, if the US initiate military operation against Iran, its citizen, or its security and interest, Iran will use its inherent right to respond proportionately. I thank you.